The following show and broadcast is a production of Better Savannah, an independent expenditure committee dedicated to better policy outcomes at the state and local level. The views, opinions, and statements made by the hosts and/or their guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Better Savannah.
John, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Chuck.
It's a busy week for us this week. It's Tuesday the 21st. We're recording what's going to be episode 57 today. This is our second of 4 scheduled interviews for the special election for House District 165 on November 2nd to fill the unexpired term of the late Representative Mickey Stevens. We interviewed Sabrina Kent the other day in terms of the chronological order. And today we're going to have on the youngest elected official ever in Chatham County's history, immediately former Board of Elections member Antwan Lang, representing the Democratic Party here in just a second. So, John, we've had a really good set of interviews so far. Got all four of the Democratic candidates confirmed for interviews now. So I'm looking forward to starting this interview with Antwan. Full disclosure, I've known, you said the other day when you knew Sabrina for a long time, I've known Antwan for about 10 years now. So, him and I go way back kind of with young Democrats, throughout various times, especially kind of the 2010, 12, 14 cycles. So really excited to have him on. I'm going to bring him in to the stream now and welcome him. Antwan, welcome to the Better Savannah podcast. You're on mute.
Hey, guys. Hey, everyone. Thank you both for allowing me to be on this platform, for just giving us an opportunity to talk about some important issues that are facing our community and maybe a vision that we can move forward with. So, again, Chuck, you're right. We have known each other for quite some time. And I hope that over the years, I've proven to be a consistent person, that I haven't wavered too much from who you first met initially. Obviously, you grow, you become better as a human being and in our arena as a leader. And Mr. McMasters, I'm learning more about you. Especially in your career as when you were on the county commission, and I admire your tenacity and your grit and your ability to stay on top of issues. And so I'm really happy again and humbled to be here and add anything I can to the conversation. So with that, let's get started, and I'm hoping this is a great opportunity.
Well, for our viewers and listeners who aren't familiar with you like we may be, why don't you just introduce yourself, give us your background and kind of what motivated you to run for this seat?
Well, thank you for the opportunity for that. I think it's important for people to know a little bit about what, I like to be human, right? So when I was born, my biological mom was on drugs and alcohol. And my biological father was incarcerated. I was born January 22nd, 1994. Actually, and I look back at my birth certificate at 6:28 a.m. So I am a morning baby. No wonder I get up so early in the morning.
I was born in prime time.
Oh, well, I can see that.
Now I'm in prime time. So there you go.
There you go. Yeah. And on January 26th, I was placed directly into foster care right here in Chatham County, DFACS. My biological mom, her rights were terminated. She voluntarily terminated her rights. My father, his rights were never in question. He didn't want anything to do with the child. So, so all in all, their rights were terminated as parents, and I was put into the system. The first place I was sent to was Toombs County, which most of us know as Vidalia, Georgia.
Right.
And unfortunately, those parents were unable to adopt me, so they placed me back into the system, and then I was placed into a place called McIntosh County. And then those parents were a little too old, so or older, so they couldn't adopt me. So then they placed me back into Chatham County. And I was in Chatham County for at least 2 years over off of Magazine Avenue in West Savannah. And finally being adopted in 1998. Uh, then I was adopted by two wonderful parents, Joanne and Thomas Lang, and given the opportunity to really start life a little bit different. And so going from literally nothing and not having a solid base or stability, moving from foster home to foster home, and then going into an environment where you had two parents, both of them had jobs, both of them had good paying jobs. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a longshoreman down on the waterfront with Local 1414 Union. And so my dad had a good union job, and my mother had a good healthcare job. And so I think it's absolutely ironic or fitting that I'm in politics, because especially in Chatham County, because when I look at what's happening right now, we're looking at a healthcare fight, and we're looking at unions, and so and good jobs that provide for families so that they don't have to worry about certain things. I was blessed to go to Windsor Forest High School. I went to Windsor Forest Elementary, Southwest Middle School, and Windsor Forest High School, where I graduated from Windsor, and then went on to Savannah State University and received my bachelor's in liberal arts and sciences and my master's in public administration. I'm also a member of the Georgia National Guard. I'll be commissioning as an officer in May, which I'm really happy to do. For over a year now, I've been preparing as an officer and becoming in that leadership role, providing for soldiers and taking care of my soldiers. I am proud to say that I was an elected official in terms of I was elected to the Board of Elections, so I have a lot of experience when it comes to that. I've been a legislative aide to State Representative Mickey Stevens. I've been the chief of staff for Senator Lester Jackson. I've interned for over 60 legislators with the Legislative Black Caucus, providing legislation, creating legislation, looking over legislation, going through the legislative process many times over. And so I'm really happy to be in this forum. Unfortunately, my parents have passed. So my mom passed when I was 13. My dad passed when I was 23. So unfortunately, my dad didn't get to see me elected at 24, but I know that I'm trying to make them proud. And so as we move forward in this forum and having a good conversation, issues and challenges that are facing our community, I want citizens to understand that my perspective and where I'm coming from on these challenges, many of them are rooted within my being, rooted within my beginning, rooted within how I was raised, my beliefs, my values, and with that, I'm going to turn it over back to you guys, and let's have a good conversation.
Yeah, let's. And Antwan, I want to just comment that I was familiar with that personal history that you just shared with us, and I think it's remarkable. I think it's incredibly unique, and you know, you probably ought to get elected just based on that history alone, let alone your policy ideas that we're going to talk about. So I just want to say I admire you. You have been consistently cool, collected, and it shows. So I just want to say hats off to you for that life story and getting as far as you have in such a short period of time. When I was elected in 2002, my mom passed away 4 months after I was elected. So unfortunately, your parents didn't have that joy and that opportunity. You made me remember how proud my mom was that I had actually succeeded in my effort and got elected to the county commission. Listen, having said that, there's an overarching question I want to ask you to explain to the best of your ability, and it's something that Better Savannah constantly asks in our videos and our dialogues and our conversations. And this is this is the question, Antwan. For the last 25 or 30 years, and I've been here about 30 years, um, Savannah, Chatham County has seen phenomenal growth and prosperity. If you look at the port of Savannah, uh, 25 years ago, we were doing, 600,000 TEUs transiting in and out of the port. Last year, I think we did over 4 million. In the tourism and hospitality industry, 20, 30 years ago, we had, less than 1 million tourists a year. Today, if you don't count visitors, but you just count tourists, we have 7 to 8 million. Quite a spread, quite significant growth. Of course, we have the Savannah College of Art and Design. That 30 years ago they were 200 people and an idea, and today they have 11,000 students in the city of Savannah. Which is interesting. A city of 145,000 has 11,000 SCAD students. So here's the question. I'm sorry I drug it out. Given all that growth and prosperity over the last 2.5 decades, why do we still have 28% poverty, 26, 27, 28, whatever number you're happy with, which was essentially the same number 20 years ago or 25 years ago? Can you enlighten us on why all that growth, all that prosperity, and no change in people's living conditions, which you talked about as a focus of your effort and your thoughts? Please.
Thank you for the question.
Sure.
It's an important topic because one of my pillars in my campaign is economic development. And when we talk about economic development, it's not just bringing jobs to the region. It's not just bringing a variety of industry. And if I may, I'll start here. I think our region, especially Savannah, but definitely our region, is very unique in that even during a recession, in many aspects, we have some safety nets in place because of our diverse economy, regional economy. When we talk about the ports, we also have industry of healthcare that employs quite a bit of people. We have an industry of governments. When we look at local county, when we look at some state departments as well, but when we also look at some federal, a lot of people don't realize that the federal government has offices here in Chatham County as well. The Secret Service, the FBI, custom and control, obviously because of, and Homeland Security, clearly because of our vulnerability to being a seaport and being an open area and being a way into our country. That is obviously a clear opportunity. But then we also look at county government that employs quite a bit of people. We look at city government that employs quite a bit of people. And then we look at the school system that employs quite a bit of people. And I'm going through this process. I'm talking about these diverse industries for a reason. when we look at what it takes to get a government job, most times you have to have, at minimum, depending on the job, you have to have a high school diploma. And then next, if you want an even better job, maybe somewhere in management or the opportunity to move up, you need to have a bachelor's. And then the next level is you need to have a master's many times for higher level, higher executive positions. That's just in government. The same is true when it comes to healthcare. Nurses make great money. Doctors make great money, but that in itself, you need money to go to school to get those specialty skills and get those specialty certificates. But we also look at the school system, and we look at teachers. We look at the diverse economy when it comes to various positions in the school system. Ultimately, I bring all of that up because it's absolutely important that when we talk about economic development, we never leave out the education piece that comes with it. I think education is absolutely the number one tool of upward mobility in our society, whether it's a formal education and going to college, or whether it's an education and going to technical school and getting a certificate or getting some kind of professional certificate to maneuver into spaces to get a better job. You're not just doing it for a better job, you're doing it for more wages, or you're doing it for a better salary. And you're doing it for a better salary because you want to provide for your family. You want to provide for your children. These are issues that we have to talk about, because when you talk about the poverty rate, we have to discuss why the poverty rate it is. And that's just in Savannah. When we talk about that 24, 26, 25% poverty rate, or 28% poverty rate, that's just you talking about Savannah. That's not even us talking about the entire county.
Yeah, the county's about 17%, and
Right.
Savannah's 28% is actually double the national average.
Right.
So
and we also, and when I'm looking at District 105, 8.6% of my district is unemployed. The largest population, or the largest industry that employs my citizens in my district, is hospitality. So the tourism industry. We're talking about people who are working as custodians, working as in the hotels in different capacities.
I get it. Let me focus this conversation for a second here. Given my setup to the question, that is, 2 decades of just
Record growth.
crazy growth in all those sectors that you mentioned, ports, SCAD, hospitality. Would you agree or disagree that our poverty numbers should have been reduced with that sort of growth and prosperity?
I absolutely agree that there should be mechanisms in place that allows the wealth in this town, or in our city, in our region, to trickle down to citizens that, for lack of better terms, were given the short end of the straw during this pandemic.
So what I heard in your first answer, let me help focus the follow-up question here, John. What I heard was economic development and education. So what has gone wrong in those two areas in the last 2 decades that you're looking to reform in the long term in this position?
I'm looking at statistics in my district right now, which I'm going to address. 26.5% of my district has a college degree. That's, I'm sorry, 55.6% of my district has a high school diploma. Let me start there.
Okay.
So most of my district, the majority of my district, has a high school diploma. The drop-off of over 30-something% in my population is when it comes to college, when it comes to getting a technical degree. It's important that I say that because, and it's important that I mentioned the 8.6% unemployment, because my goal, my personal goal for my district, would be to slash that 8.6% unemployment into take it down at least 2% within the next 4 years. Now, that would be a personal goal of mine. Well, how do I do that?
That'd be huge.
Well, how do I do that is by making sure I'm advocating for jobs, but it's not just the jobs. Where I was going a few moments ago is, we've got to make sure that our citizens are prepared in terms of education, in terms of technical skills, in order to get these good jobs when they come. Because what these companies, many of them are doing, they will locate their business here, like Amazon, for instance, will locate their business here, but they will recruit from outside of this area. And then the employees that work at that facility, they don't live in Chatham County. So that money that is being made in this area is not staying here.
Okay.
So again, education is the key part, but it's also on our end making sure that we're putting resources at the feet of our citizens so that they make sure that they know that this is available for you to go get a good job. This is available. Now, I've got to also say it's incumbent upon the citizen to take advantage of the benefits, of the resources.
Yeah, but Antwan, isn't it incumbent morally or otherwise for the hospitality industry, which is, up until COVID, they were making money hand over fist. The occupancy rates, the room rates, their pay scales did not keep.
And they will get back there again. And if now is not the time to reset and have the conversation with this industry, when will it be?
I guess I'm just trying to get you to say wages are too low, because that's what we believe.
And one of your opponents came out and called for a $48 minimum wage. Not that we think that's realistic or feasible, but the point of wages, I think, is the point we're trying to address. Your thoughts?
Yes. So I do think we need to raise the minimum wage for private industry. But let me say this. We can't do that as a state legislature. We cannot force a private industry or a private. We can say we can raise a tax. We can raise a minimal state, which I think the state of Georgia is $5.25 right now.
Right.
Which is well below, $2 and some change below the federal minimum wage. So we can raise the minimum wage when it comes to the state, but it's going to take, and I don't want to speak out of ignorance. The Republican Party is in charge of the legislature. All forms of it. So I will advocate.
We're aware, but we're also aware that look, the House is only in the Republicans' hands by 12 seats, 11 seats. That may change over the course of your career.
I will advocate to increase our minimum wage.
Okay.
That's a given.
Well, listen, since we're on this subject, and we've got 5 very complex questions for you.
And let me also say, let me get through my statement.
Yeah.
Because I don't want anyone who's viewing this to misconstrue anything I say because I'm cut off.
Okay.
So, and I'll try to keep my answers.
Fair enough.
I'll try to keep my answers concise, but sometimes it takes a little bit more explaining, because if you just get a snippet of what someone says, it can be misconstrued later on as, oh, Antwan agrees with Sabrina Kent that we need to have $48. That's not what I said.
No. And you've got the benefit of this show where you don't have other candidates competing for time. This is all the Antwan.
That's why we said we want to do 60 to 90 minutes, so that way you get a long form segment to really talk about these policies. Go ahead, John.
Well, no, I want to cede the floor back to Antwan so he can finish that thought. And then I want to start with the last question first.
Yes.
Here, Chuck.
Since we're on this topic, I agree.
I'm done.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Do you want me to do it, John?
Sure. Go ahead, Chuck.
So along the lines of economic development, I'm very much agreeing with you that you've got constraints on raising the minimum wage. There's a couple of areas where you'll have leverage, like casinos, where the Republicans don't have enough votes on their own to pass. But I want to talk about the local economic development and Savannah Economic Development Authority. Okay. This is state chartered. The delegation will have, influence, especially if we get a Democratic governor after the elections next year. I know that that's not the term you're running for, and I'll respect that if that's your position. But
let me add to that. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Make sure I make it clear. I am not running just to fill an unexpired term. I'm running to be the representative for now and for the future.
It's clear.
I think, and that's a great statement. I think that's needed in this race when there are candidates not kind of seeking that ground out like you are. So I appreciate that. Let me lead to the question. With that being said, Savannah Economic Development Authority is the agency that deals in contracts with the City of Savannah, Chatham County, CAT, and school board. They negotiate on behalf of these entities for new jobs to bring businesses into Chatham County. Currently, there is no requirement for any form of independent audit that would match the deals that are up front. So, for example, Amazon that you use for, they're going to come in and create 250 jobs at $16 an hour, right? Where is the ability to verify that? What was the company, John, that left and we found out?
It was like a Michael's Warehouse.
It was like a warehouse deal where they had promised 150 jobs, and when they packed up shop and laid everybody off, we found out they only hired 80 people, right? So the deals that are being presented through Savannah Economic Development Authority are tax abatements, 10, 15, 20 years of full abatements for 5 years, percentage step up until full taxation, in addition to the ability to bond out dollars for infrastructure projects surrounding that development. A couple of questions surrounding that. Do you support an independent audit being required on this agency from the state, from like DCA or another department that maybe the Department of Economic Development, some type of independent audit? And B, do you support changing the way the board is appointed? Let's start with the first one, and then I'll explain the second one a little bit. What are your thoughts on audits with this economic development agency here in town?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I support audits of all types in any industry or in any entity. I think it's a great way of accountability. In fact, the Board of Elections just underwent before I vacated my seat to run for State House. We had just had an audit. I serve on several nonprofit boards. I'm the chair of a board. And one thing I've always said, and I actually served on the Cultural Affairs Commission. I've served in several capacities and around the city. And I will always say, and I have a master's in public administration. So on the theory side and on the practical side, I will always be in favor of audits of any entity. It will allow us to see any opportunities of growth where we need to make changes, where some things may be where we may need to tweak how we operate in certain areas. But the short answer to your question is I do support audits in many instances in entities.
So you're a big process guy. I appreciate that answer. Very, very great. I like that answer a lot. And I liked your answer on another show the other day where you said the first duty of the House is to pass a budget. I like that you're familiar with the process. So along those lines, will you work to convince your delegation colleagues to get a majority in the delegation to amend the charter to require those independent audits by a different entity other than SEDA? Will you work for that goal over a length of time? I don't expect you to get this done in one session.
Immediately.
Right. But is that something you will work on over time?
What I will commit to working on is understanding the views of my colleagues first, understanding where they're coming from, and listening to their concerns. And then if I see any validity, because there may be some things that they bring up that I may not be aware of at the moment. So for me to say, I'm going to convince them to do X, Y, and Z, I think it's premature. But what I will commit to is making sure that I look at how the entity is being operated, that I make sure I understand it thoroughly, and that I ask very pointed questions to my colleagues and to others as to whether or not this the way the setup is needs to be looked at. Now, if I believe, and I think you both will agree, if I believe a process is not appropriate, or if I believe that it needs to change, I have never steered away from voicing my opinion. That was evident during the Tony Riley disqualification, when I voted not for, um, uh, not against the disqualification, but I voted against the way we were disqualifying the candidate, the process. And so I have a track record of making sure that if something is against my morals or my values and I can't sleep at night, I'm going to question it, and I'm going to respectfully um, disagree and find a way to change it. But
let me go. I appreciate that answer. Are you done? Go ahead. Let me let you finish.
Make sure that I put out there, this delegation, and any delegation really, it is a team effort. You don't make decisions by yourself, and I think it's immature and premature for any candidate to say that they're going to do this X, Y, and Z, and not take into account that if one senator, and depending on how this redistricting issue goes, if one senator out of the two disagrees with anything, it's a dead deal when it comes to Chatham County's delegation.
Yes, sir.
If a certain number of members of the House, representatives, have said, nope, we're not going to do it, it doesn't matter what the senators say. If a certain number of those representatives say no, it's not going to happen. So I think it's very important that I make clear that as a member of the delegation, it's a team effort, and you have to be willing to listen to all sides, no matter the party. Listen to all sides, understand all the facts of the matter, not opinions, but all the facts, and then make your decision based on your facts.
Well, of course, as a, we would hope to consider to be one of the premier kind of progressive political entities in town. A lot of people look to us to kind of sift through. So I want to differentiate kind of what you'll commit to working on to kind of what your positions are as you stand for election. Because I agree those are two different things. And I respect the point that you're making there. So I think your position is you're for audits. You're not sure how and when you'll be able to work on that, depending on what the delegation views and dynamics are. I think that's a perfectly fair answer. The second part of the SEDA thing, Antwan, is the structure of the board itself. The board itself is there are 15 board members on a rotating basis. Chatham County government gets one appointment. City of Savannah gets the second appointment. And then the board itself appoints the third appointment. A big premise that John alluded to in the first question, Better Savannah's political project, Antwan, is that there's this philosophy of winners take all. The titans of the industries, tourism, logistics, port, etc., they are the ones who are usually on this board. I'll give this board credit, just like the, GP Georgia Ports Authority. They're more inclusive in the last 5 years or so than ever before. I don't want to make this about inclusivity at the level. I want to make it about policy. I believe that the board having the ability to appoint 1/3 of its members itself keeps the revolving door going of elite policymakers who maybe are not thinking about the least of these, those among us. Also, too, when that was written, it was 20 years ago or so, 25 years ago. So I think we're a regional economy now. Would you, as a position, support, changing that board's ability to appoint that third member and maybe give it to a rotating municipality in the county or so? Do you understand what I'm saying when that third seat being appointed by the board itself, that seems to be a problem?
Well, again, I think, and you hit it on the head, it is a state entity. And I think that, or at least it's a state chartered entity rather. I think that you're right. It does need better representation of the people that it actually represents. Because at the end, but is not elected, obviously it's appointed. But at the end of the day, I think it should reflect more of the individuals that are actually from here, or that live in the area that it impacts. But I have to also say that you have to take into account the purpose of the board. The purpose of the board is to bring economic drivers to this region. And I think there are some people, I won't say all, I think there are some people who are strategically placed in society who who has the relationships globally to bring uh, good jobs to this area. It's incumbent upon us as leaders to make sure that we're doing the due diligence and follow through, that when these businesses are coming and being introduced to our region, that they understand our priorities when it comes to making sure that our citizens are taken care of. That's a responsibility of us that we are charged with. But the other responsibility, and I'm stopping short of saying I support a total change of the board's appointments, because what I would like to see, or what I would like to talk with my colleagues about, is what does the change look like? It's one thing to speak and say, "Oh, we want to change how it's appointed." Well, what's the solution? I don't want to just say I support changing this and not have a solution of what I would want it to look like. So I would want to say I would ask to you, if you wouldn't mind, having a conversation, and it's not just one-sided with me just kind of giving
Sure.
a point.
Oh, I have a point already. Go ahead. I'm waiting.
What would be the alternative that you would?
It's inherently undemocratic, in my opinion. You're asking me opinion, and this is just to expound on it, right? It's inherently undemocratic. This is an organization that has the power of millions of dollars of leverage on behalf of the local governments. It is a state chartered authority, but I want all of our viewers and listeners to keep in mind, any of the local 4 government entities could pull out of that agreement at any time. Okay, so it's a state chartered entity, but those boards, the board of the Board of Education, the City Council, the Chatham County government, they are not mandated under state law to participate. They have an enabling and ordinance that goes along with the state language to allow them to do this. So it's a two-way street in terms of my opinion. And remember, we're really about kind of local equity here. So it's undemocratic in that non-elected people appointed those board members, right? So again, it's a rotating 3 seats: Chatham County, City of Savannah, and then the board itself. That third member is appointed theoretically by about a third of the board that was never appointed by an elected official. To me, it's just inherently undemocratic. I think the city of Pooler deserves to put somebody on that board every once in a while. I think Port Wentworth deserves to put somebody on that board every once in a while, right? You see where I'm going with that? I just think that just from a democracy standpoint, not even talking about policy change in terms of audits or anything, just from a democratically, point of view, I think it's better for the citizens that way. Your thoughts?
I would be willing, and I would be committed to exploring. One of the things that we can do as legislators is request for a exploratory committee, one that looks at the entity, studies the issue. It's a study committee.
Yes.
Study the issue, and I would be committed to working with my colleagues in the delegation to study the matter and look at an alternative, perhaps a more democratic method, perhaps a different way of appointing. We just did it with the convention center, where the convention center was appointed one way. Now, whether people agree or not, it's appointed a different way, where the governor has the most appointments. So it's not unheard of to change. I think it's just wise of us to study the issue and study the alternative.
Antwan, John, I'm gonna let you do the next question here, but I just want to stop and say, I respect the answer, because that actually is the process that would go. If we're going to change the charter for SEDA, it would have to go to a study committee first. I doubt the delegation would take any action without some type of studying happening for a session or so. So I just, you committing to trying to get that exploratory committee just shows your knowledge of the process. And I think from a certain perspective shows that you should have some commitment to the issue, because you know what to do to get it on the table. But again, I just think, I want people to understand, I think it's inherently undemocratic and we need to change it. John, go ahead.
I want to make one point on the SEDA
Yes.
before we move on. And Antwan, I want you if you can, to walk backwards in this conversation, and everything that we're asking you is built off of our supposition or base core belief that over the last 2.5 decades, this community has experienced incredible growth and prosperity, and we have not changed the lives of what is a double.
Which just fundamentally means the winners are taking all. And we don't see solutions without some of those winners taking less, not decimating private enterprise or success of these industries, these winners. But I don't see how they can win all continuing. We don't think we can grow our way out of this. If we grow another 20, 40%, we're just going to have that many more homeless, that many more in poverty, unless some policies are going to change. Go ahead, John, with the next question.
Antwan, I have done research into economic development authorities across the United States. Okay. Every mid-size or larger community kind of has one. And the whole premise is they create a deal to bring some jobs to town. And the carrot in this is you don't have to pay your property taxes 100%. You don't have to pay your school taxes 100%. You're getting this huge advantage to start your business. You're shorting the schools, the county, the courts, the jails, the city, everything. Revenue that normally would be coming in is not going to come in. That's a pretty big carve out. Okay. I will tell you that probably 80% and maybe more of economic development authorities in the United States have what's called a clawback clause. Have you ever heard of that? Okay. Basically, how it works is if I commit to bringing my small factory here with 150 jobs at $17 an hour, and after a year or so, my performance is audited. You're a process guy. An independent audit comes in and says, you know what, John, you've only created 120 jobs. You're behind the commitment. So we want you to try to make up that shortfall. And you're given enough time to make up that shortfall. But if you don't, the clawback clause in that economic development deal says, we reserve the rights because you've underproduced to increase your property tax schedule a little bit to reflect that shortfall. To me, that's good business. What you will find once you're elected and you sit down and talk, you're going to see a beautiful SEDA annual brochure that says that they created 1,700 new jobs. And I want you to ask them, how did you calculate these 1,700 jobs with a $7 million payroll? And they're going to tell you, Antwan, that information comes from client projections. Now, I don't know if you're going to be satisfied with that, but we're not satisfied with that. So I just want to put a tack in this economic development process story, and we'll move on to the next question.
Antwan, you are, I'm sure, aware that the 2019 City of Savannah elections were what many consider to be revolutionary. Only two incumbents returned. Either everyone was defeated or retired. Only Mayor Van Johnson and Mayor Pro Tem Shabazz returned to the city council. We've seen what, about 18, 19 months of that has looked like since we have what at times seems a very bitterly divided council. The kind of what we call the original sin, or kind of the source of the poisoned well, as they when they say the well's been poisoned. I know you know that term, having been around the legislature. For us, seems to be the April 2020 rules ordinance of City Council that was passed on a 5-4 vote. that prevented members from getting anything on the agenda unless the mayor supported it. And if the mayor didn't support it, you needed 5 members of council to get something on the agenda. This is local government. The delegation does have control of the charter. Again, knowing that you can't convince all of your colleagues, just as a matter of position, did you support changing those rules via charter? If the delegation is in support of it, but just your own position, do you support changing that to allow a lower threshold to get things on the agenda for the city of Savannah?
Let me first address the question in this way.
Yes.
I absolutely agree, or I absolutely think that members of the city council should be allowed to add items to the agenda. I do not want to get into the weeds of how the council operate their business. Unless their operation is fundamentally hurting the city and hurting the region and hurting the citizens. But I absolutely agree and would support members of the city council being able to add items to the agenda, because they were elected to serve citizens, and the citizens should have a right through their elected official, through their elected representative, to be able to bring items on agendas that go before the full council. But I have to respect, whether I like it or not, I have to respect that a majority of the council has made a decision that the rest of the council has to abide by.
Are you going to respect the legislature passing 5149, a bill that, restricts women's access to health care? I just don't understand that logic. It was passed on a 5-4 vote. It's a bitterly divided council. You yourself just said, unless it's impacting, unless it's a big problem impacting the city. I think we've met that threshold where the delegation should step in and lower the requirement from 5 to at least 3. Doesn't have to be 1. I understand the logic of not having any single member jam up an agenda. You understand that, having been on the Board of Elections. But I just want to push back on that idea that you want to respect that outcome when the outcome is really disastrous for citizens in Savannah.
I think you're mistaking my word of respect as a word or a synonym for like or agree. I never said I agreed. I never said I like. What I said is I respect the decision of the individuals that outvoted other individuals. That's how a democracy works, or a representative democracy works. Whether I agree with it or not, I respect their decision, and I respect the way they went about it. They went about it the way the system allows them to go about it. They didn't break any laws. They didn't break any state laws or any other rules other than majority ruled. Now, that's not to say that I agree that that's the way they should have operated. That's not to say that I disagree. That's not to say that it is my role as a state representative to talk down to members of the city council and say, you guys were wrong to not let these other members put something on the agenda. That's their business.
But Antwan, if you're elected,
you're the caretaker of the charter.
You're right. You're in a superior position to correct the anomaly or the injustice or the wrong that you may not like, but you're saying you're going to respect.
Just like Joe Biden's DOJ is in a position to correct SB 208 or 206 or whatever it is, the voting restrictions bills, right? Those levels of government are made to interact with each other. And if the outcome on a 5-4 vote is this disastrous 19 months in, and our delegation won't step, how bad does it have to get, as a divided council before you do step in? I guess that's the next question.
Let me ask you this. Okay, let's say we step in and we change it. And we say, no, we're going to lower the threshold.
Okay.
What next are we going to step in and lower the threshold for? What's the next issue?
Well, who knows?
Continue, let me finish.
Okay.
If we continue to jump into city business every time we disagree with how they operate, that's not our job.
Antwan,
Now, whether
you were stretching that fabric.
Whether you agree with me or not, it is not my job to go to city council every time I disagree with something they've done. Well, and chastise them.
To your point, if all those constituents that are represented and their elected officials are unable to get what's important to them on the agenda, I think you have a fiduciary and moral responsibility as a superior paternal position in the state delegation to fix that.
Let me use, for example, the Board of Elections.
Okay.
What's happening currently with Board of Elections across the state? State government is saying, we don't like when this Board of Elections does this, does that, or the third. So let's pass a sweeping elections integrity bill that will allow us to take over any Board of Elections that we deem to be doing the wrong thing. But in reality, the motive behind that was to really take over Fulton County, because there were political motives behind that type of action. That's where the state government is trying to come in and take over a local board that's either been locally elected, which would be Chatham County, because we're the only elected board, or locally appointed, which would be every other county in 158 counties. That is not right. And if they start doing, and let me finish this. That wasn't the first time that the state government tried to do that. They tried to do the same thing when it came to airports, because what they really wanted, they said, oh, the airport in Atlanta is being run crazy, and we want to take it over. So what we're going to do is create a bill that tries to take over every airport in the state, just so we can get to that one. Again, I say, I don't have to agree with the decision that the 5-4 made, but it was a local city elected alderman decision that they're going to have to deal with. And if it rises to the level of the delegation having to intercede, at that point and only at that point will I interject my opinions about how a local government that's elected by the local people handle their business. That's my position. You can disagree or agree with it, but that is my position, and I'm not changing it.
Okay, great. We'll go to the next question. And for the record, I disagree with you.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that, John. Let's ask about the hotel motel tax.
Okay.
The hotel motel tax was shot down by the delegation this past session. The city is asking to expand it to the extra 2% from 6 to 8 in order to use that extra 2% for tourism product development, specifically between Visit Savannah and the city. It was sold specifically to promote African-American tourism product. They're going to hire somebody as a full-time staff position to oversee this. That would be an African-American person. We have been part of the Weeping Time Coalition, trying to preserve as much of the property surrounding that historic, tragic event that happened in West Savannah. Will you support raising the hotel motel tax from 6 to 8%, which is a decision you would have to vote on inside the delegation, without conditions placed on there that are geared towards preserving and saving that property to preserve it for future generations?
Let me approach that question this way. I was in many of those meetings and a lot of those discussions. And I believe, number one, that any money that's being brought into our region, such as the hotel motel tax, it goes back to when we initially started this conversation about the poverty level. We have to do our due diligence when it comes to making sure that there's equity or equity, and it's equitable, that it's being distributed in ways that we can see deliverables to the citizens of our region. Again, I say, as elected officials, as leaders, we've got to have goals and we've got to have a vision for the future. And if the funds are not being used as a way to bring down poverty or to address these certain issues, then we have a problem. We have to have a conversation about it. Now, in those meetings, I heard different opinions. I heard different opinions from the city manager, who is not the city manager at this moment. So when we get into session come January, there's going to be a new city manager that may have a different priority, but probably will have the same priority as the city council or the majority of city council or the mayor. But at the end of the day, we're going to have a new person that we're going to have to deal with, and their recommendations or what they would like to do with the money or what their reasons for asking for a higher percentage. For me, coming in as a new representative, it's going to be incumbent upon me to do my research, to make sure I understand exactly what each entity is asking for from the City of Savannah and Visit Savannah, and bringing into the conversation, making sure that we always bring in the Black Chamber of Commerce, but we can't leave out the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We've got to make sure that there's equity, that the funds are being equitable for all parties. And we can't just say no, or we can't just say yes. I've got to have a reason when I come back to my district and I have a town hall and I get this question. I've got to have a reason as to why I said no, or I've got to have a reason as to why I said yes. And so it's going to be incumbent. And I know that I'm not answering your question directly as to whether I'm going to support it or not, but I don't want to make the premature mistake of saying, yes, I'll support it. And then information later on comes out that, oh, wait, I may have to change what I said 3 months ago on the Better Savannah show, because more information has come out, or new priorities have, or new deals have been made in order to make this equitable, or in order not to make this equitable. So long story short, it is still under review. And yes, again, I was in the legislature this past session, and I heard the concerns of the city manager, because I was in that room when the city came up, when the chairman of Chester Ellis came up, when the delegation had the meeting. I was in the room because I was the chief of staff for Senator Lester Jackson. So I understand very clearly of some of the issues that come about when it comes to this this hotel motel tax. But I will not make a decision today about whether I'm going to support or deny. What I will say is that I'm going to fight for equitability for the funds being used. I'm going to fight to make sure that people are being treated fairly, not given crumbs and said, okay, well, you guys, you got to deal with, $50,000 worth of a $65 million pot. What are you going to do with $50,000? Not a darn thing. So I think it's incumbent upon me as a newly elected state representative to, number one, do my due diligence, understand what each party is asking for, and making sure I remain in tune with the fact that if this deal is not equitable, if it's not going to benefit more than just the same individuals that has been benefiting, then that's something that I can't support. But if there's a deal on the table that says we're going to provide more resources in terms of money to other entities such as the Black Chamber and the Hispanic Chamber, that's something that I can agree to.
Okay, Antwan, let me ask you one final question on this question before we move on. The 165th, your district, what approximately is the African American or Black populace? Over half?
55.6%.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to ask you this question, and this has nothing to do with the delegation and how you're going to vote on it. I'm just asking you, person to person, not in the context of how you're going to vote in the delegation. Do you support the preservation of the remaining property that is known as the Weeping Time Tract?
I support knowing facts. And if the facts point to
there's nothing in doubt about the event.
The Bradley plywood property was where it happened 100% for sure. Everybody agrees with that.
Number one, I can't make a decision for land that does not belong to the state. That's number one. Number two, I can't make a decision that of land that doesn't even belong to the city of Savannah. Do I agree that if indeed this is land that was made, that is what it is, that is what people say it is? Do I agree that land like that should be preserved? Heck yes. But if the facts point to that that's not the land, then we're going to have to understand that that's not where we're going to have to, that's not the fight.
All right. Well, I don't think there's any dispute over where in 1859 364 people were sold. That is established history.
Well,
and the question becomes what to do with the tract. Do you preserve it or do you not?
It doesn't belong to the state.
I understand that, but let's be honest. We all understand eminent domain. All right. Let's go on to our next question.
No. Before you go to the next question, let me make sure I make it clear to viewers that are watching. I am not saying that I disagree whether or not it's a true sacred landmark or whether it's not. What I will say is, if it is, I will fight to preserve it.
Okay.
If it's not, then I will continue to monitor the situation.
Okay. This question is about the Georgia OCG code governing impact fees. Okay. And you know that Savannah is in the midst of trying to put together an impact fee ordinance. A little late, but nonetheless very necessary. According to the code, there are really only three major buckets that impact fee revenue can be used for. One is public safety, the second is recreation, and the third is infrastructure like streets, roads, and drainage. Okay. Would you support adding a fourth bucket to the OCG code on impact fee revenue usage? And that fourth bucket would be affordable housing.
Yes.
Thank you. Chuck, you want to take the next question?
You're on mute, Chuck.
I'm the one on mute. All right. I want to ask you about what's kind of the number one priority for the Georgia House Democratic Caucus, and that's Medicaid expansion. I pointed out, like, only one of your mentors, Senator Jackson, he's the only person in our delegation on both sides of the aisle I ever hear even say the words Medicaid expansion. If you keep, kind of apprised, with the AJC stuff, which I know you do, there's room on the table with the Kemp administration for a Medicaid expansion deal, especially depending on what the outcome of the elections next fall are. If they lose seats or lose the House, which again, I know you're planning on being there beyond the half term you're running for right now. Where does Medicaid expansion rank in your priority list? Is that going to be an issue that you're going to fight for? What are your thoughts on trying to get a deal across the table with the Kemp administration?
Well, let me first address it from this perspective. My father, who was born in 1936, when I was 19, 20 years old, when I was 19, 20 years old, I was dealing with taking care of my dad, who was at that time maybe 78, 79. and he had dementia. But he was blessed to have a pension, and was blessed to have a Social Security, and blessed to have some savings in an IRA. So when it was time for my family and I to look at what we needed to do, I was in college. My sister was working. You know, everyone had other things that they were doing, so it was difficult. Always, you know, going with my father's progression of dementia and him falling different times, and I would have to leave from school to go pick him up, literally lift him up off the ground. I learned a heck of a lot from firsthand knowledge of the importance of having the expansion of Medicaid and Medicare, because that expansion doesn't just help citizens who may have a little resources and may help from the back end, but it also helps economic development. It gives jobs. It provides jobs for people, which provides a living for people. But it helps our citizens in terms of healthcare. And so, and we talk often, the Democratic Party often talks about access to healthcare. Expanding Medicaid will expand access to healthcare. So I will continue. And you asked me where it falls on my priority. It's on the same line, not 1, 2, or 3. It's on the same line as education, economic development, and healthcare, because all three are intertwined with each other.
I couldn't agree more. Let me ask you a question about education, because you did lead off the first question we asked you about the poverty not changing. You know, I couldn't agree with you more. Antwan, the funding formula for the state of Georgia education system is known as QBE, Quality Basic Education Funding Formula. It was written before you were born. It was actually written the year I was born. It's very old. It's very outdated, and it really needs some updating. I know that you don't have the power to change this yourself, but I'm just looking for your position on these issues. You know, what are your thoughts on how the state of Georgia funds public education, how reliant school systems like ours are on property taxes, and kind of the future of educational reforms that might benefit the least of these in our county to change the poverty direction? Your thoughts on the education system?
Sure. First, let me address it from this perspective. You can have all the money in the world and still be uneducated. If you look at how much a private school in Chatham County spends per child compared to how much maybe the public school system spends per child, the public school spends double of what a private school may spend. But it's about how you use the resources you have in order to benefit the child. So I think on one hand, we have to look at how we're utilizing our resources. And this isn't a knock on our school system. This is about looking at how we're using our resources to best benefit our children. But second, I think you're right that we do need to, I'll point it from this side. As Democrats, I often pose the question: if we were to take over the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion tomorrow, what are our priorities? What laws, what legislation would we pass immediately? What's the plan? Okay, I ask that because we talk about the formula. We talk about the problem with the formula. I want to talk about the solution. What's the alternative? I'm not saying that the formula is right. In fact, it's flawed and it's outdated. But we have to study and look at what's the alternative. And the moment we get the power to change it, how do we do it? What's the process? What's the plan to do that? What's the impact of the change? Positive change can sometimes yield short-term hurt. Are we prepared to make a major change in our education system, and we may see some negative impact on the onset as soon as we make the change, but long-term, there's a positive impact? Are we willing, or are we prepared for that?
Now, Governor Roy Barnes from 2002 couldn't agree with you more. I know exactly the thoughts you're saying about reforms that are kind of maybe ahead of their time or might hurt might be painful for, maybe the teachers to accept or the parents to accept. No, I agree. There's a lot of that's going to have to be discussed. But I think, the answer I heard was that, there's definitely a flaw in the formula. We need to be looking for what the solutions are. But debating how bad the formula is kind of beating a dead horse. I like that answer. Go ahead.
And I know you like it, and I think most smart people would end there. But let me go a little further. It's not just the formula. When we talk about money, we have to talk about how it's distributed. You talk about, we didn't talk about this part, but I'm bringing it up. When we talk about eSPLOS, and we're asking citizens to vote again for eSPLOS, my concern isn't so much of we're going to be able to build new schools. I mean, my alma mater, Windsor Forest High School, is on the list to get a new campus. I am all for that. But on the economic development piece, what I am for is making sure that the contract that goes towards building that campus is given to individuals, and that businesses that are minority businesses are able to bid well on those contracts. That's how you spread the wealth, by making sure that businesses are having the ability to access a $125 million or $600 million and have a piece of that pie. So that would be a concern. And I use eSPLOS as an example of monies that is used for schooling. We have to look at how those monies are divided up, how they're used, how those resources are being given to our various school districts. And then I think maybe an audit needs to be happening for that. So my concern is making sure that every child, not just in my district, but every child in Georgia has a quality education. And I think that when we say quality, sometimes that means different things to different people. So for me, quality means that when I go into a classroom and I'm sitting in that classroom, I know the teacher cares about my education. I know that my parents care about my education, but I too, as a student, I'm learning real education. I'm learning real things that I would love to see financial literacy in the schools. I would love to see people teaching about credit. But when you have a teacher that doesn't know anything about credit, their credit is jacked up. How can you teach something that you don't do yourself? So there's so many different things that we can talk about when it comes to education. But when it comes to education, we have to talk about how we're divvying up money and the definition of a quality education. Quality education will mean a different thing to many different people. And I think it's important that we have a conversation and a consensus on what does quality education mean for us in Chatham County.
John, I've got one more question. Do you have what else do you want to ask? I don't want to keep him in his car running. I don't want the battery to die or anything.
No, I think he's been very generous with his time.
And very busy. You can see everybody when you see this episode. He's between events. He's definitely working hard in the district. Go ahead, John.
No, I just appreciate you coming on, Antwan. You're impressive. I wish you all the luck in this race. I think you're in the forefront of the candidates, and I just can't thank you enough for talking to us.
Let me ask this one more question, because this issue is an issue where you really could play a pivotal role, and that's the issue of casino gambling and the future of it in Georgia. There are not enough votes in the Republican caucus to pass that amendment that would go to the voters as a referendum on their own. So there is likelihood where 10 or 20 Democratic members of the House who may be open to the idea could go along to get that referendum on the ballot for 2024, 2026 down the road. What are the conditions or concessions, prerequisites that you would be looking for to support that type of issue? There's the chairman of the delegation, Ron Stevens, is one of the principal authors of these bills. One of the longtime members, J. Craig Gordon from 163, before he retired, was a sometimes proponent of these. as well. Your thoughts on that issue, as Savannah is kind of one of those destination resorts Ron Stevens keeps talking about?
Well, first, let me say that those individuals have had many years of opportunity to look at and be brought to different regions where casinos are and have been located, and they've been able to study and have access to information about what impact casinos have had in other areas. What I will be looking for is what impact will a casino have for our area? And as I said last night in a forum, there are pros and cons. And I think we have to weigh those pros and cons, and we have to decide whether or not the pros outweigh the cons. But we also have to weigh we have to weigh whether or not those minimum cons, the bad things that may happen, whether or not we're willing as a community to accept that. And that includes poverty. That includes the potential of higher poverty. But people, the argument to that is, oh, it will bring jobs. Okay, it will bring jobs, but how can you guarantee that those jobs are going to the people who are in poverty now that are within that 28% in Savannah? You can't guarantee that unless there's like we said earlier with SEDA, unless there's an agreement among the casinos that say we're going to hire 40% of our employees from the local region. The second thing is, and that's the poverty issue, the second thing is crime. Will that impact crime higher? When you have individuals who are betting and whatever else, various elements of crime that comes with a casino or a new industry, those are more issues that we're going to have to deal with if that happens. We have to ask ourselves, are we willing to take that risk? That's second. That's crime. On the pro side of that, you have the argument that we could use the extra revenue on taxes and things like that comes from casino gambling. We can use that towards education. Where my rebuttal to that is, what are we doing with the funds that we're already using towards education when it comes to the lottery? How is that being divvied up? The discrepancies that I see from the lottery are that students, especially when it comes to Hope Scholarship and when it comes to
the Zell Miller version of it now. Yes, I know what you're going with here.
The discrepancies that I see is schools in Chatham County are not all created equal. And that's the same thing when it comes to schools all over the state. Every school is not created equal, which means there are students in other public school districts that may be learning better, more, that has a better quality of education than maybe a student in Chatham County. And when they're tested one another, and the requirements to receive funds from these programs is they have to have a 3.7 whatever GPA. And the reason that these other kids from other areas are getting that money because they have a 3.7, it's because their quality of education is different. And the playing field is not leveled for a child here in Chatham County. So I may have voted in favor of extra funding for education, but I didn't look at the impact that it's going to have when it comes to divvying up those fees or divvying up those funds that are raised from that pool of money. So what I'm looking at is how that money is going to be divided, and whether or not the pro of having that pot of money for students, whether that outweighs the con. For example, okay, let's say that students in our district, in our school district, does get that money. Okay, they go to school, they're debt free. They come back and want to work in Chatham County, but the areas, because that same vehicle that funded their education also brought crime and devalued property values, they can no longer, they don't want to live here, so they stay gone. So basically, I just funded the education of a prominent person that could come back and help us, but I also
made them leave,
created a problem.
And they're going to end up moving away probably. I want to tell you, I thought that was your strongest answer tonight. I think you knocked a lot of that answer out of the park. The means, what he's alluding to for our listeners and viewers about the Hope Scholarship was a deal ironically cut by leader Stacey Abrams and Governor, what's his name?
Deal.
Deal. Yes, Governor Nathan Deal, which changed the Hope Scholarship from a 3.0 GPA with no testing requirements to a 3.7 GPA with testing requirements, which disproportionately benefited upper class white students. And the original goal the Zell Miller had for the Hope Scholarship was to not to be accessible to everybody, and 3.0 was accessible to everybody, in these schools that are disadvantaged. A 3.0 was attainable, to be able to get that leg up into the education. So that is one of the strongest answers you've had. I supported Stacey Evans in the primary solely on that issue. And I hope that you'll talk more about in the future. I want to give you a chance to close out. I've got your website, www.Antwan Lang. I'm going to put this scrolling across the bottom here. Why don't you tell people how to find you, get in contact with you, and be able to support you?
Sure. Again, guys, thank you so much. I think it's absolutely important to continue conversations like this. And as we can see, we're not going to always agree, but that's okay. That's a democracy. That's the point of our beautiful system and idea of government, that we don't have to agree. But where we break down is when we become disagreeable. And I think, and I'm so grateful that we can disagree, but at the same time, there are other items on our agenda that we agree with. And so, and that's the
Yes.
same, that's true when I get to the state capitol. My job and what I'm going to do is work across the aisle to pass meaningful legislation. But my first priority is the budget, and making sure that we bring resources back home, making sure that we bring resources to Savannah State University, making sure that we bring resources back to our city government and county government, that we may invest in infrastructure projects and in return building jobs in economic development, making sure that we're investing in our education system and making sure that we give the resources to our school system so that they may do their job and do it well. That's my whole platform, if so to speak. And I think it's absolutely incumbent that I say this. Out of all of my opponents, I am the only one with over a decade of experience actually in the legislature, working on legislation since I was 16, 17 years old. I remember helping draw the districts that we currently have 10 years ago. I was in those meetings. I was in those rooms. I even drew the district or most of the district for Senator Lester Jackson and Representative Stevens. I did that, and I did it with them, and they trained me and they showed me how the process operates. So when some people talk about they have experience in drawing, I actually did it. When some people talk about they have certain relationships at the state level, I actually have those relationships. I know where the bathrooms are in the state capitol. I know where legislative council is when I need to go get a bill drafted. I know that. I know how to get a bill or how to request a bill on the rules calendar. I know where committee rooms are when it's time to go meet. And I know the legislative process. I don't want anyone to discount my age because of what other people say. The experiences that I've had have blessed me to know a lot. And I'm always willing to learn even more. But I would say that I am absolutely equipped to be ready on day one to represent District 165, represent Chatham County, Savannah in this region, and fight for all Georgians across this state. That's what I'm ready for. And I've been prepared for it. And I would just ask for anyone who's listening, look at the candidates, make the best choice from your heart. And I'm humbly asking for your vote, your early vote if you decide to vote early. Remember that there are some changes when it comes to early voting, when it comes to dropping off your ballot at at a drop box, when it comes to filling out absentee ballot request forms. There's some IDs, there's some, and some people may not know this, I'm a part of a lawsuit against Senate Bill 202 or many of the provisions for Senate Bill 202. So I've been on this fight for a long time, and I will continue to be on this fight with you. And so again, thank you for the opportunity. I am asking humbly for your vote on November 2nd, 2021. And I hope to be your next state representative for District 165.
Antwan, I can't thank you enough for setting aside the time during a busy day. I know that you're campaigning hard. I hope that you get to wherever you're going next safely. There are 5 candidates qualified in this race. I somehow don't think this will be the last time we'll be talking before a candidate is sworn in to that seat. So we wish you the best of luck. Again, stay safe on the campaign trail and keep working as hard as I know that you are. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Antwan.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate it. Mr. McMasters, thank you so much.
No problem.
Not a problem. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys, be safe. Everyone.
Good night. John, let me fix this here. Give me a second. Branding, and let's play that.
Don't you think it's time for the City of Savannah to have an honest tourism management plan? Let SCAD start paying its fair share? And the hospitality industry needs to increase its wages? The impacts of new growth should not cost residents. All local elected officials on council and commission should have term limits. We're working hard to accomplish these policies. We need your help. Please contribute whatever you can, $5, $10, or $20, by going to bettersavannah.org. Donate. Thank you.
John, that was our second interview. Boy, he really is a smart, sharp, I think perhaps overly cautious, overly calculated for no reason. I think, I don't think now's the time for that for him. I think that's down the road after he's been there a while, but that's just my opinion. That was an interesting interview. Your thoughts?
He rubs me the wrong way.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I think there's just too much cautiousness there for me. A little bit.
It's a shame, Chuck, because he is so smart, and he has
an amazing story. A great story to tell.
What 1 in 100,000 story. It's really powerful. It's compelling. He should get elected just on that story itself.
Yes.
But he is obstinate in dialogue. Like that whole rules package thing, I wanted to say, hey, fuck, that's how Jim Crow and the Black Code.
I was going to bring up Plessy and Ferguson, but I just didn't want to go there. I tried to frame it in the issue of the women's issue.
Yep.
So should we just respect that outcome in Texas without having our federal government try to intervene? I don't think that's how federalism was designed to work, John. I think there's checks and balances at every level. And I think when the city government gets out of hand, the state has to step in. When the state gets out of hand, the federal government steps in. When the federal government goes over its skis, John, the states sue the federal government and cities sue the federal government. This happens all the time. So I was a little disappointed that on some of our core issues, he's not really. My takeaway was he's not really hip with the local agenda we have. He's actually stronger on some of the statewide. He gave a really good, endorsement of Medicaid expansion, and the answer with Hope Scholarship being non-means tested and benefiting, suburban white kids, John. Those two answers, he knocked those out of the park, in my opinion. I think he would be an effective state rep, in terms of showing up to do the job. I think he would learn and get better. But just off of that interview, I'd find it hard to believe he's gonna, come over to our side of viewpoints on some core issues.
Yeah. He sure shirked that weeping time issue, and I had to just corner him and say, dude, how much
Do you support the preservation of the land where that many people were sold?
Yeah.
And let's just make a distinction for, we were talking about the Bradley plywood property at that point. We're not even talking about the Salvation Army piece.
No. I consider.
I think he may have been confusing those two, but I don't think. I think you were clear enough.
Well, as a educated black man, he should know a lot more about the weeping time than he evidenced tonight.
He may ultimately know and just chose not to exhibit that knowledge. I don't know what that decision was about. Again, he's clearly a front runner. He's acting like a front runner in terms of his overly cautiousness. And I'm more interested to hear from Mayor Edna Jackson now after having that interview.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't.
As the supposed Savannah Morning News named front runners, I'm interested to talk to both of them.
Well, it's interesting that I predict that Edna will skirt our issues even more heavily than Antwan, which is going to be a disappointment because the two front runners are avoiding taking on core issues that we deem really important.
I just, I've seen it before, and Antwan, I know you'll see this episode, man, but too many people run for office with, well, I can't take a position on anything. You just have to trust me that I'll make the right decision when it comes because I'll listen to all sides. We've tried that for 25 years. That's not working. I don't want to try that again.
We're not recording this, are we?
Yeah, this is still the episode, John.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, man. I wanted to have an instant reaction, just like we did with Sabrina. I was disappointed, I want to support him. He's in my generation, but the issues that we are advocating for and that thousands of people follow our page, and about 14 to 1,600 of them listen to these episodes regularly. Yeah. He's just too far off on too many of the issues. Look, I'm not saying we won't support him if he's in the runoff. I'm just saying
if he's the best we got, then he's the best we got.
Yeah.
I will say he was definitive on one question, Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
One question. Do you remember which one it was?
He was definitive on the rules package.
Well,
he said that's my position and I'm not changing it.
Yeah. No, I meant with us definitively on one issue.
Which one was that? The audits?
No, it was he found.
What are you talking about then?
Well, I'm talking about the new question we added about will you work to change the code on impact fee ordinances? So
yes, yeah, no, I agree. Okay, yeah, that was a solid answer.
Absolutely. So
yeah,
that's a start.
I don't understand why anybody would be against that. How can you not, think that impact fees, which are being assessed on new development, specifically higher end development, should not be used for affordable housing? Everybody should agree with that. No, I want to be fair and say, Antwan, you tried to meet us halfway. I don't think you quite got there, but you definitely gave a good effort. Honestly, there's some answers that were really strong. Again, I view him as a potential future star in politics here.
Absolutely.
I just think that, there's a little bit too much disagreement to want to, kind of get behind him, full hog compared to what we've heard so far from the other candidates. But we're not done interviewing.
No, we're not.
So,
we're not.
I think it just remains to be seen. I believe that we'll release this one in third in order. So, I'm still kind of really impressed with Sabrina Kent and looking forward to what Clinton Young and Mayor Edna Jackson have to say.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us for this special episode. Like I said, I think it's episode 57, but who knows at this point? Maybe I'll change up the order and it'll be somewhat, but I'll go ahead and take us out, John. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thank you, Chuck. Good job.
Savannah needs additional tourism. Savannah needs additional tourism.
I mean, I appreciate our tourism community. I appreciate our hoteliers in particular.